If you're one of those people who struggle to follow seam allowances, let me show you a few little tips on how to achieve good results with sewing. The first thing I have is a seam magnetic guide. So what this does is it's just a block of metal with a magnet underneath, and it has a straight wall. That straight wall sits along whatever line on your machine, on the guidelines, whatever measurement you need. So if your seam allowance is 10 millimeters, or that's 1 centimeter, then you need to place your magnet, that wall, along that 1 centimeter. If it's, for example, at 2, then place it at 2. So pop that there. And then we can just go slowly on our machine and just follow that guideline. Keep your fabric close to the seam guide wall. Now I'll show you something here. What I want you to focus on is where that needle is. That needle is where that seam allowance is. So don't try to keep that part of the fabric against the wall, because that will be no good. You want that piece just there to be against the wall. So stop and start as you go along and readjust your fabric. Now we have this seam guide, which is made from Prim. It's nice and big. And we have a similar one from Hemline. This is a bit cuter. It's got a smiley face on it. The wall on that is longer, so that would help you if you're a beginner. The difference is the magnet on the plastic one from Hemline isn't as big as the one from Prim. And there are two advantages. There are advantages and disadvantages to that. The one with the Prim, you can't position it further back because there's plastic contradicting with the metal. So it's not allowing you to position it very well on there. And the plastic one will. The disadvantage of the plastic one, it's plastic, and we want to come away from using as much plastic as possible. Now there's a myth as well using magnets near your sewing machine. That is a myth. So you've got the magnets there to keep you sewing in a straight line, and keep your speed slow until you get used to working with the seam allowances. So once you get there, let's get to the pivot point, and I've set my machine so that the needle stays down. I can see there that that fabric is folding over the wall. So if I turn that back, keep it against the wall, go a couple more stitches, and if we turn that then, can you see how that sits flatly against the wall? So I know I've reached the proper seam allowance there. And we just keep our speed nice and slow until we're used to doing this. Stop that there. Let's take that magnet away. And an alternative to using a magnet is using masking tape. Now, you need to use something that's low adhesive. That means it's not sticky. You can buy this branded stuff from 3M. It's painter's tape. Now, it's expensive because it's branded, but it is low adhesive and you aren't going to get sticky residue on your machine. You will get some, in which case just get a damp dishcloth and wipe that away. Maybe pop a little bit of washing up liquid on there. I've just got some cheap masking tape here. If I just tear a little bit away, I can place that on my machine. Now you can remove the extension box if you want to, so that you can pop that on there like so. So pop that on the one, so our line is on the one. Now here what you can do is you can leave that there permanently, which isn't a great idea because you do need to get to the needle plate to change your bobbin. You will need to clean fluff under there, so you will start noticing a build-up of fluff and deposits, because the sticky residue, even though you might not feel it, it will still be there and you will attract dust and it will start looking a bit grubby. It's not a perfect solution, but it is a solution. So just practice again slowly and just maintain a steady pace when you're sewing. Now as we're approaching the curve, what I want you to see is where the needle is. The needle is where I need to concentrate on my seam allowance. Now that's where I need to concentrate on the seam allowance at that point. So if I draw a line there, what that tells me is that line is where I need to keep my fabric along that masking tape, and that's where my seam allowance is. So let's carry on. So I'm not really fussed, even though my heart is shaped to be there, I need to concentrate and make sure my fabric is always there. If I find I'm having to pull too much, I just lift the presser foot and just turn ever so slightly, focusing on that area to make sure that is where my fabric is staying. So just turn it ever so slightly, keep going, stop there because it's starting to pull away, so turn again, and I've come away too far. You can see that gap there, so I could reverse back one stitch there and then turn, do one stitch and just keep lifting the presser foot. And this comes with practice. I'm going very slow just for demonstration, but as you do this more and more, you will find that you speed up quite a lot. So just keep going around that curve, a couple of stitches at a time. And keep on that. Come to a straight bit, making sure our fabric stays there. Now this is where it's difficult. Without that seam guide, you can't see the masking tape, although you can see where it's level to. Now if I turn there, I can see my fabric isn't going to be on the seam allowance there, so I need to go down further. So I'll carry on further, and if I turn around now, I can see the fabric is touching the seam allowance I need to be on, because I know this is a straight bit. And just keep focusing on that line there, and then just keep ever so slightly. We're all right, ever so slightly. And we could just do a lock stitch there and remove that there. Now that was where I started at the beginning, where I went wrong, but then going nice and slow, I've managed to keep myself a perfect curve all the way around. That's where I overshot, and I reversed back, and I secured the stitches so it's fine. I can snip to that and it will be fine. And even though I've completed the full heart shape, that's fine. I can clip into that and that would be fine. If I was to use this as a stuffy, do use this section here as a straight bit for your turning hole. Never do a turning hole on a curve. That will be almost impossible to hand stitch a ladder stitch. You do struggle getting a perfect curve on a ladder stitch. It is possible, but as a beginner you'll struggle. So keep that area clear of stitching. So you would start sewing from here and you would finish here, and you would have that gap, and you could do a turning hole there. So we're going to sew a perfect circle. So I've got a small round pieces of fabric. I'm going to sew on this one because this is less frayed, and I will just follow my line that I've drawn. So the way to get this line is pop your needle in the machine. Just remove the foot, pop the needle in the machine, place a ruler along where the needle is and find a straight line, and that's where my seam allowance needs to be. So if I place the foot back, I can then just position my fabric to stay along that seam allowance. So keeping that along there at all times, and keep a nice steady slow pace. So don't overcross there at any point.